When we talk about Republic tactics during the Clone Wars, we have a bit of a tendency to treat the Grand Army of the Republic as one monolithic unit, which employed the same approaches across the board. This was, of course, how the Kaminoans wanted the GAR to work, but that was never a realistic ideal, and as soon as different units emerged early in the war, different tactics emerged with them. Many units in the GAR became well known for specializing in a certain brand of tactics. The 7th Sky Corps, for example, was known for its rapid air-to-ground assaults, while the 327th Star Corps was used for missions in unusual and often hostile environments. But to what degree did these tactics vary? Today, we're going to be answering that question by looking at two units with polar opposite approaches, the Galactic Marines and the 41st Elite Corps. This video is sponsored by Surfshark. If you're paranoid about the FBI guys snooping around and checking your questionable internet history, Surfshark is the fast and easy to use VPN that allows you to install and run on unlimited devices on a single subscription. Not only does Surfshark protect your data and IP from prying eyes, but for all my anime profile pic bros in the comments, you can use Surfshark to connect to 15 of the largest Netflix country libraries, which, of course, includes Japan, and some of my favorite classic animes like Dragon Ball Z. With all of these features and many more, Surfshark is so confident you'll love their product that they're offering a 30-day money-back guarantee. So make sure you head to my link in the description to get Surfshark for 83% off, as well as 3 months completely free. Now, if you're a regular on this channel, you're probably familiar with these two units, so we're only going to do a quick recap. The 41st Elite Corps was a legion under the command of Luminara Unduli and Commander Gree, which specialized in working with loyalist alien species. Meanwhile, the Galactic Marines, formerly known as the 21st Nova Corps, was led by our least favorite Jedi, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Commander Bakara. Under the leadership of Bakara, a notorious hardass, the Marines became an incredibly aggressive force that specialized in winning battles that other units would have considered lost. On the surface, those two tactical approaches don't sound entirely dissimilar, or at least not totally opposite. But as they say, the dark side is in the details, so let's take a closer look at the tactics of these two units. Firstly, we can't properly consider tactics without first considering the tacticians. Each of these units was under the command of a renowned Jedi general, but these Jedi actually played very little role in shaping the mission profiles of their units. If they had, things may have turned out differently, as Ki-Adi-Mundi and Luminara Unduli were both exceedingly orthodox as far as Jedi went. Their clone liaisons were a different matter, however. As we mentioned earlier, Commander Bakara was a hardass. Officially known as CC-1138, Bakara was a perfectionist at best and a micromanager at worst. His biggest concern was the individual performances of the men under his command, which he paid very close attention to. As the leader of one of the foremost units in the GAR, Bakara had very high standards for his men, and he would not hesitate to transfer clones out of his unit if he felt they didn't meet those standards. Virtually all of his attention was focused on making the Marines into the most efficient, relentless, and effective armies that the galaxy had ever seen. He wasn't a total waste of carbon, as he did care about his men to some degree, but clones had to do a lot to earn that care, and his tactics were often aggressive to the point of callousness all the same. Commander Gree, on the other hand, was a total nerd, and we mean that in a good way. As we discussed in a video about the true meaning of his name, Gree was as an anthropologist by hobby and greatly enjoyed studying obscure alien cultures. CC-1004 was focused much less on his men and much more on the various species his men would fight with or against. He generally trusted his troops to hone their own skills, and where Bakara dedicated an extreme amount of focus to the quality of his troops, Gree was focused on essentially everything else. The tactics of the two units generally followed from the command styles of their commanders. In brief, the tactics of the Galactic Marines were relentless and thoroughly unsubtle. Bakara's approach to combat was to hit hard and then keep hitting hard until something gave. These tactics would be questionable for some lesser units, but the Galactic Marines, to their credit, became quite good at putting them into practice. Under Bakara's purview, they had been trained for virtually everything. Aside from the extensive combat training they received on Camino, Galactic Marines received additional conditioning, training in ship-to-ship boarding actions, both underwater and in space, and extra training in combat and marksmanship. With these skills, and with as fierce a taskmaster as Bakara leading them, the Galactic Marines could do virtually anything in battle. Generally, the Galactic Marines preferred to act as a fast-moving, rapid response force, hitting hard enough to scatter the enemy and then moving on to the next crisis. They were, however, known to get involved in protracted sieges as well, in which they tended to be so relentless you could confuse them with droids. The Marines only ever retreated when they had to, and they rarely worked feints or let other complex tactical approaches interfere with a good old-fashioned fight. They tended to fight battles head-on, advancing as far as they could for as long as they could in a highly aggressive manner. When their advances were stalled, they made the Separatists pay dearly for every lost meter of ground. The two most well-known battles in which the Galactic Marines fought were perfect examples of their sheer tenacity. The Battle of Megiddo was their most famous engagement, in which the Galactic Marines kept up a siege of one of the IGBC's most important strongholds for nearly 2 full years. Despite heavy Separatist resistance, the Galactic Marines refused to give in on Munilinst and kept up with the assault for an astonishing amount of time. But the Marines got a chance to shine in other battles too. In the Battle of New Bornolix, Bakara and his men were sent to capture a Separatist stronghold in the Outer Rim Siege's Sereno Theatre. During the battle, they were equipped with experimental power armor, with which they led the charge against waves of battle droids and Mandalorian protectors. But the weapon systems on their suits malfunctioned during the battle, leaving them more or less unarmed in the face of an advancing battalion of super battle droids. Despite this shortcoming, Bakara refused to retreat. Instead, he ordered his men to charge and fight the droids hand to hand, using their exosuits' strength enhancements to literally rip the B-2s apart. The Republic won that battle, in large part thanks to the Marines. The 41st Elite Corps, meanwhile, became experts in one of the Republic's favourite tactical approaches, the militia model. Thought up by the Jedi as a means of countering the GAR's persistent numbers shortage, the militia model involved small units of clones deploying to separatist worlds, training loyalist rebels to fight for the Republic, and then serving as support while the locals took back their homeworlds. The 41st helped pioneer this model, and thanks to Gree's expertise in alien cultures, they became quite good at it. Following Gree's lead, the 41st specialized in working with particularly alien indigenous cultures, which the commanders of most other GAR units were unable to wrap their heads around. In particular, they adapted well to working with relatively primitive species and species with deep-set customs that were hard for outsiders to understand. They had a knack for turning these species into effective rebel armies, which would be of great help both in liberating worlds from separatist control and in keeping them free from the Confederacy. As part of this mission profile, the 41st Elite also became experts in counterinsurgency tactics and warfare in hostile environments. They liked to play to the advantages of their allies and make use of their environments in combat, relying on subtlety and a superior understanding of contested worlds to win the day. Their missions were rarely quick, but they did end up being successful most of the time, as the Separatists never cared to learn as much about alien cultures as the likes of Commander Gree. A great example of the sort of missions the 41st was dispatched on was the Battle of Kashyyyk. On Kashyyyk, the 41st made contact with the local Wookiee population, aided by Grand Master Yoda, and forged an alliance. As they waited for the Confederacy to make landfall at Kachiro in the early stages of the battle, they planned their defense around Wookiee tactics. They used Kachiro's Roshir trees for cover and let the Wookiees, who were positively devastating warriors, lead the charge against the first droid waves, a clever tactical move and a gesture of respect. These two approaches to combat could not have been more different. Where the 41st Elite Corps favoured subtlety and taking advantage of surroundings, the Galactic Marines were as unsubtle as possible, preferring to rely solely on themselves and their skills. The Galactic Marines were aggressive and relentless, preferring to strike quickly and efficiently, while the 41st was partial to feints, guerrilla tactics, and extremely long campaigns in unusual environments. The only real similarities the two armies shared beyond being clone units was that they were both considered elite, if for vastly different reasons. But despite this strong contradiction, it's important to remember that both of these units were fighting under the same Grand Army. Both of their tactics had their place in the Clone Wars, and both were responsible for the Republic's eventual triumph in that conflict. So that's our look at two clone units with polar opposite tactical approaches. But what do you think? Are there other clone units you'd like us to discuss the tactics of? Let us know your thoughts and more in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.